Okay. Hi, this is Eugene with the Quarter Design War, Lifestyle Design Meets an Identity Crisis. And today is actually it's Tuesday, I just realized that. It is Tuesday, and I've been talking to a lot of people. And one of the things that I've been noticing and also talking to people about is depression and what that kind of looks like. And hey, Allison, there's something that's really interesting with type A depression, and I've been doing a lot of research behind this type A depression, and it hasn't actually been scientifically proven, but I wanted to talk to you guys about it. So for today's Facebook Live chat, we're going to talk about type A depression, what that looks like after interviewing over 50 people. Hey, I have sort of created a case study behind that. So, hey, Julia. So type A depression is very different from most people's depression. Like, clearly there is clinical depression, where that means actually 1 out of 10 people will experience depression. And so that 1 out of 10 does need to receive medical help. And that's very different. But this type A depression is really interesting because it is situational. And so when it's situational, it's one of those weird things. Hey, Joe, it's situational where you feel like you can't get out, but there are some steps that you can get out. And so if you are a type A person, it hits people really hard. And if you are a type A person, you are more likely to not tell anyone that you're depressed. So you'll be the person that has always gotten every accolade, and you've always done super well. You've gotten every sales goal. You've been valedictorian at your schools. You literally were the person that always was successful in everything that you did. So when you come to this point of uncertainty, and you come to this point of not feeling like your best self, you don't know who to talk to. Because if you talk, thank you, I did it 2 nights ago. Thanks, Jolie. So when you are depressed and you're a type A person, you do not know who to talk to. And the reason why you don't know who to talk to is because when we are type A, and when we are the people that have always hit every accolade, we are showing a sign of vulnerability. And when we show a sign of vulnerability, it can be show guilt and shame. So I want to give you guys a couple examples. One example is from a girl that I interviewed a long time ago, and she was this amazing person, had she had kids. I'm not going to say how many, but she was this amazing person and hit every accolade in her life. And not only did she hit every accolade in her life, she kept beating herself on it. So I kept asking her over and over again, why do you feel so hard on yourself? And she says, I feel like I'm not enough. So she said that she feels like she's not enough, and she feels like she's failing. And I started literally pinpointing all the times that she was feeling sad. And the reality is, she was feeling sad 5 times out of the week. So like Monday, Sunday hit, she was feeling sad. Thursday would hit, she was feeling sad. And so we found out that that person has situational depression. The same goes for me. When I was actually from the ages of 15 to 25, I didn't realize that I was depressed. And I would literally, and I used to tell, it's a joke now because I'm free from it, but I used to literally sit in a corner and cry, and I wouldn't tell anybody. And there's a difference between crying. There's a difference between crying and getting over something, and crying and feeling really weak, and crying and feeling like you're not enough, and crying and feeling that you're worthless. And for me, it used to be beauty. So I would literally cry and say that I wasn't pretty and that men wouldn't want me. And I didn't realize that I had just kept telling this story. And no one knew that, because the reason why no one knew that I was depressed was because I was always the person that was like, hey, let's get stuff done. Hey, let's be the person that that is really excited about life. Hey. And so whenever I would actually experience vulnerability, people didn't know how to handle it. And the reason why people didn't know how to handle the vulnerability is because I was never the person that said, my life sucks, or I can't do this. I would always be the person that would say, what's the next step and how can I solve it? So it didn't realize and occurred to me that this depression was something that was really heavy on me. And I didn't realize, I mean, for me, it lasted a way much longer time. And for some of you guys, it might last for 2 days. Some of you might last for 2 years. But the reality is type A depression is really different. So millennials right now, this is the science behind all of it, right? Currently, millennials have the highest form of anxiety and depression. And the reason why we have anxiety and depression, there are a couple of reasons. One is fear of missing out. So you're on Facebook Live, you're on this channel. Sometimes we go on social media and we are more likely to look at social media and compare ourselves to other people and feel like we're not enough. So when we're constantly on the phone or we're constantly Pinteresting and saying like, oh, I wish I had this, it's good to an extent, but we create these own fear of missing out. So that's actually one thing that is a negative effect. The other effect that we have is, besides the FOMO, is actual technology. Like, we are the first generation that has technology at our fingertips. And this sounds really crazy, but there's this great study, and there's tons of studies that are called cyber addiction. And when you look at cyber addiction, for males, it's a little bit different because a lot of times males go on their computers and they'll escape. So when they escape, they'll go off to their computer, play their NBA Live. If you're a healthy person, that's totally fine. But if you're in this type A, like I've always done well, most men will shut down and they'll go and play video games. And so people will feel like that person is not responding. In reality, they're feeling vulnerable and they don't know how to share it. And we know from facts that men don't like to talk about their shame and guilt. And actually, we don't have enough studies to talk about men's shame and guilt. And we know that that happens all the time. The other thing is with women, a lot of times, I used to always say that people talk about depression with women. We take it in a very different way. And especially if you are type A, a lot of times we talk about, like, I have to be the best at this. I have to be the best, or I'm a terrible person, or I'm a horrible woman. And we hold these really, really heavy ideas on what depression is and what it looks like. And so there are a couple activities, and there are great books, and I'll make sure I include them at the link. The reason why we have depression and anxiety is because it's actually a back idea of fight or flight. So the reason why we have fight or flight is we used to use it in a very primitive way when we were really depressed, or when we were trying to fend off people and trying to fend off animals and fend off disease. We literally would have this, like, either I'm going to fight when I'm scared, or I'm going to run. So most of the time, if you see a bear, you're going to run. So that's your flight. And if you see someone that is trying to take your baby, most of the time you're going to fight. So we have these ideas where it's like fight or flight, and fight or flight, the flight becomes anxiety, and the fight becomes anxiety, where you're constantly fighting and trying to figure out a way to get out of a situation. But with depression, it's sometimes it could be a fight, or sometimes it can be a flight where you're retreating. So if you're retreating and you're feeling depressed, you don't want to talk about it. Type A depression particularly is, we just don't know. We haven't done enough studies about it, but we do know that it's not studied enough. And so I want to make sure that I'm really clear, and I want to make sure, because I'm noticing that a lot of people are coming in and out. So what I've been talking about type A depression and the science behind that. So we were just talking about the difference between depression and our fight or flight mentality. And so if you are a type A person, and if you have technology, sometimes it's really hard to let go of something that you love the most. But one of the first steps that you could do to actually understand your depression, or feeling sad, or feeling trapped, is turn off your computer. So I think my friend is on this call, or on the Facebook Live, but a long time ago when I was really sad, I had a really good friend who's on here, and she was my roommate. And one of the things that I started doing when I was living with her is I literally would turn off all the electronics an hour before I went to bed. And the reason why I turned off those electronics is I realized that I was getting anxious, and then I started feeling really depressed because I was like, oh, I'm not doing enough with my life. And then I would just start saying, I'm worthless, I'm not enough, I'm a terrible person. And I would literally create these thought patterns in my head that would say, oh, I'm super depressed. Oh, I'm super depressed and I suck and I'm not a good person. And I wouldn't tell other people this, but I literally would just say all of these crazy things in my head. And I mean, the things are there for a reason, but there are different ways to control it. So I literally would sit down and I would start writing out all of my fears. And so this is called thought work. And there is a great podcaster who's called the Life Coach School with Brooke Castillo. And she said, in order to do self-coaching, you should actually look at your thought work and really start thinking about what's going on in your head. So I would literally start writing every single night and say, okay, why am I depressed? Okay, what do I feel about my body? What do I feel about being loved? What do I feel about, I literally would just write about something and I would literally write down negative thoughts. And if you look at my journal, I look like a crazy person. I probably look like Van Gogh, just like saying all these crazy things in my head, like, you're not enough. If you gain this much amount of weight, you're going to suck. Like, I literally just kept writing them all down. And I would go back and look at them. And then I realized my pattern and the pattern that I had. And some of you guys may have a different pattern, but the pattern that I had was, oh, the Van Gogh joke, thanks. The pattern that I had was a fear of abandonment. So the reason why I was hiding or getting incredibly, incredibly sad was because I always had this fear of, if I wasn't giving enough to people, or if I wasn't being the most extroverted person, that I was afraid of losing them. So I would be afraid of losing people. Hey, Nicole, I would be afraid of losing people. I would be afraid of being myself. And I literally kept creating the story in my head. And it literally would influence everything. So my fear of abandonment would happen when I would date a guy. I literally would be such a bitch to the guys I would date. And I remember 2 or 3 guys when I lived in Connecticut would literally say that I was a bitch. And I realized the reason why is because I was so depressed and I had all these crazy negative thoughts about myself that I would never let a man in. And that, even when I had a healthy relationship at the time, I thought, oh, you know what? This guy's going to leave. So it doesn't matter. I can say whatever I want to say because this guy really doesn't matter. Because first of all, he's a man, which is not healthy at all. And then second of all, I would say it doesn't matter because we're going to break up. And I can honestly say that not only is that real, but that's probably why I ended the last relationship that I had, which was a couple of years ago before I did that path of celibacy. And dating. So I think that was the big issue with thinking about my thought pattern, and then also thinking about the depression, because a lot of type A people have anxiety, but we also have depression, and we don't know how to talk to people. So there are a couple of things that that could be really helpful. So this is where Facebook groups can help, because if you are dealing with situational depression, you can literally say, oh, I'm not happy. Let me explain this to someone, and put it on the Facebook group and say, hey, this is something that I'm struggling with. Is anybody else having the same feelings? So if you're saying that you're struggling with it, and you're saying that that you don't feel enough, then there are going to be more people that are agreeing with you, and that's going to fill you up. The other thing is, I do say turn off the computer at least, or turn off your phone at least once a week. Like, you can literally start with that. Like, turn off your phone at night once a week. Well, you're probably thinking, well, how am I going to wake up? Get an alarm clock. Or another thing, especially when people have situational depression, and I'm going to make sure that I end this really quickly. When you have situational depression and you are type A, break out of your friend group. Because a lot of times, your friends know your story, they know who you are, so they're going to keep continuing that story of like, oh yeah, I understand, like that guy sucks, and they're not really going to push you to the level. And there are some people that will push you to the level, but a lot of friends are not going to push you to the level that you want to be, because they already know you, so they don't know how depressed you can be. The other thing is, and this is sometimes, it depends on where you're at with your depression. Sometimes you might need therapy. And if you have therapy, you need to make sure that you're specific with your goal. So if you say like, "Hey, I'm feeling depressed, but I want to understand my depression. Let's try to figure it out." Your therapist is more likely to help you out. Now, if you come in and you say my life is horrible, then a lot of times the therapist will, and this is from interviewing people, a lot of the time the therapist, that's their job. Their job is to actually feed, to make you release your guilt. And sometimes that guilt can last for a year, and sometimes that guilt can last for 6 or 7 years. And so when you're thinking about getting super excited because I'm about to have a chat. When you are depressed and you're going to therapy, it's got to be really specific. So there's this like one, it says, how do I know what type I am? Like type A, type B. Well, honestly, there hasn't been enough studies. So one of the studies that they came out with was literally 60 years ago, where a guy started noticing the patterns between people, and he would say how many people are type A. The people that were type A were the ones that were more likely to get chronic disease, were more likely to have anxiety, were more likely to overwork themselves, and were more likely to work hard and stress about all the goals. They would meet every goal, but they would be really depressed. And then type B would be the person that's more relaxed. But we know for a fact that pretty much most people can go into type A and type B. So it's not a specific thing. And I really think that millennials in particular, and now that we have technology, people are being forced into being type A. And that sounds really crazy, but everybody wants you to like hit your goals. Everybody wants to hit your target. And people don't want to just let you be. And this is just the culture that we're creating. So it's so funny. I was actually talking to my boyfriend. He's like, I don't really believe in the type A he's like, I don't really believe in the type A, type B thing. And I said, it's the person that overworks. So if you are an introvert and you still are overworking and you feel a lot of tension and you feel depressed, then you are more likely to get depression. And so I'm actually really excited about this. Clearly I'm excited about my coaching, but this is something that I started blogging about a long, long time ago. Because I was depressed. I had my quarter life crisis. I was super sad and I didn't really know who to turn. So I just kept looking at entrepreneurs, and I kept reading. Like I remember reading Tim Ferriss's story because I like checked a book out. And I was like, I think this guy has a quarter life crisis. Like he's working hard. He's overworking himself. He's like underneath the desk and he hates his job. And I think that was the thing was that I was like, oh, other people are experiencing this and other people are like me. So all these people are hitting their accolades and all these people are doing really well. And from looking at that experience now, I realize that this is a thing and it's not being studied. And if it is being studied, it's being studied in a very skewed way and we don't have enough information. So in terms of talking about a quarter life crisis and talking about identity crisis and anxiety and depression, a lot of the reasons why we get depressed and have anxiety is because we don't feel like we're enough. Now, this is definitely not completely science-based. This is just talking about what it looks like with situational depression. So I gave you guys a couple of tips. Turn off your phone. But a lot of it has to do with you and your soul searching. Like what are those demons? What are those monsters that you want to get out? And how can you get out with them? So for my group coaching, we are going to talk a lot about that. And we're actually going to talk about our parents and family stories and how our parents and family stories help make us create that depression. Because a lot of times, especially if you're type A, you've always wanted to please someone. And even if you do have the drive, you're always constantly searching for that next piece. Like who can I hit? What target can I hit? Who can I talk to? Who can I serve? And so we stop we feel bad when we don't hit those accolades, and we feel really guilty and we feel really vulnerable. Brene Brown has a great book about it's Daring Greatly, and it's all about fear and shame. And so that fear and shame that we have, we can really actually let go and let loose. And personally, for someone who used to be, or who is a teacher and used to teach kids, I literally was just depressed most of the time. And I thought it was them, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was dealing with stuff that had happened a long time ago. So if you're interested in talking about your parent story, your thoughts, what does your thought process look like? What is your morning routine? What is the turning off it looks like? We would definitely talk about it, but I literally read every day, at least an hour a day, and I'm obsessed with science. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm a pleaser. I'm just learning to say that that's okay. Like, that is a hard thing, particularly with women. And then also, another thing with men, it's actually hard for people to receive, because they're like, I'm going to give, give, give. I'm going to provide for my family. I'm the hunter, hunter, hunter. And then for women, it's I'm the gatherer. So we have these like weird ways of expressing our depression, and then also we have a couple of weird ways to express how we're trying to achieve certain accolades. So that part wasn't that clear, and when I thought about it, I thought this is actually not clear at all. But in terms of the depression and anxiety part, I have been talking and researching with a lot of people, and I thought that I had to get a master's in psychology, a master's in psychology to understand it, but it's just understanding the human nature, and then also just reading my butt off, understanding how the brain works. So please message me if you know anybody that's interested in the Mindset Bootcamp, because really it's all about getting out of our heads and getting into our heart and then pushing through. All right, bye.